I want to talk about how influential this film was. Watching it now, I could see like, oh my goodness, Ghostbusters like was influenced by this, and Nightmare on Elm Street was influenced by this, and The Sixth Sense was influenced by this, and wowza, so much has taken from this film that traumatized me as a 4-year-old.
Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit.
I'm Emily Guy Birkin, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit, because pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I'll be sharing my deep thoughts about the 1982 film Poltergeist with my sister, Tracie Guy Decker, and with you. Let's dive in. So, Trace, I know you've seen this movie because it was a traumatic event from our early childhood. It was the Father of the Year award to our dad in somewhere around 1983. Yeah. Do you want to tell the story of how we both saw this movie for the first time?
I feel like we've even talked about it on the show before. Like, it was on cable, and we're like, oh, it's a little girl like us. And we started watching it. And this was back in
the day when if you didn't have a TV guide, you didn't know what it was you were watching if you missed the beginning.
Right. And so we started watching, and like by the time we realized that it was a horror movie, like Dad was invested and like wouldn't let us turn it off.
And we were too scared to leave the room by ourselves.
It was 83, then like I was like 7 or 8. So
I was 4. I was 4 years old.
Okay, so I was 7. Yeah. Whew. Yeah. Wow. So I have to say I haven't seen it since then. But I have pretty strong memories. So in my head, the furniture that's in my brain about Poltergeist is that they built a house on top of a Native American graveyard, and the ghosts or the spirits of the dead were like came through the television. I think they sucked the little girl into the television, and lots of hijinks ensue, and a dude like pulled his face off in the mirror. And there was like static snow on the TV and like voices underneath of it. And that's what's in my head. And it scared me so bad that I am now 49 years old, and no thank you, I don't want to watch that movie. So that's what's in my head about this movie. But I have to ask, like, it was so traumatic. Like, why did you want to go back to it? Why are we talking about it?
So I wanted to revisit it in part because of my experience watching Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, that was the like, oh dear God, no movie of my childhood.
Right, the Boogeyman.
And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed watching it. And I have become a horror fan as an adult. And I knew I could handle it now, you know? So for years after that, all you had to do was say the word poltergeist and I would climb the walls. And if I recall correctly, I wouldn't go into any room, even the bathroom, by myself. I had to have an adult with me at all times.
For a little while, yeah. And like for years and years and years, like snow static on a television would freak me the hell out.
So I wanted to revisit it in part to exorcise the demon, so to speak. Yeah. And also because it is listed as like one of the best horror movies ever made. And I'm also a little bit curious. Now, that was not a parenting decision I could understand that Dad made. Like, I get getting invested in a movie. I also get the fact that it was a lot harder to come by a movie. And
I mean, yes, and like back then with the cable, like when they rerun it all the time. Like if HBO was showing the movie, they would show it again.
We're never going to see it again. Your daughters are terrified.
And 4 and 7.
Tiny little daughters are terrified. So part of it was like, what was it about this movie that Dad found so compelling?
That he was willing to risk our well-being for it. Yeah, fair. And listeners, our dad is not around anymore.
We cannot ask him. I wish I had thought to do that. Although I kind of feel like Dad would do this thing where he would kind of deny the not super great
totally, he would have totally denied it. He would
Yeah.
totally have denied it. And like, I think he would have convinced himself that this
Yeah.
didn't actually happen.
Yeah, I can remember when my older son was 2 years old, we were in Pittsburgh. We met with Dad in Pittsburgh sometime around Christmas so we could spend a little time with him. We got an Airbnb for everybody. And so there was Pittsburgh's so hilly, there was a car stuck at the bottom of the hill that couldn't get up because it was so icy. And it was a mom and grandmother and a little baby, like about my son's age, in the back seat. And both the mom and grandma were smoking. And like he said to them, like he helped them get the car going and then said to him, like, you shouldn't be smoking in front of that baby. And I was just like, you hypocrite. You smoked with me in the back of the car. Now, you didn't know better in 1983, but you did it.
And the only reason he stopped was because he almost died of a heart attack. It wasn't for our well-being.
Anyway, let's get to
Poltergeist.
So that's why I was thinking about it. And then, so there's some things I want to talk about that I find very interesting, partially because I love haunted house stories. I love the lore behind poltergeists, in part because the lore behind poltergeists surrounds adolescent girls in particular. And it is
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Like mythology of poltergeists is that they occur specifically when a girl basically reaches puberty. And
they're like menstrual ghosts?
And it's this sense that upon reaching that kind of maturity, there's this like, it sends off this energy.
Right, this energy. There's this power that cannot be contained.
So, which is just absolutely.
Wasn't the child in the movie like our age though, like 7 at the time?
We'll get there.
Okay.
So cool. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it. But there's a lot to go into it. Now, this story was written by Steven Spielberg, and my God, that man does story construction right. He does such good story construction.
I didn't know
it's
that
a Steven Spielberg movie. It's unclear how much he had to do with the directing of it because he's a
screenwriter.
And he's one of them. The story is by him, and then he was the screenwriter with like 2 other people. Toby Hooper is the director who had directed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But Spielberg was on set and like definitely threw his weight around. So it's his movie.
Huh.
So there's that aspect to it. There's a lot about like family and suburbia and like the fear of technology, specifically television. And there is this question of respect for the dead, that part that you remembered of what happened, why they were being haunted. The idea of mothers and daughters in particular, and not necessarily biological mothers and daughters. There's this really interesting through line of mothers and daughters. And I want to talk about how influential this film was. Watching it now, I could see like, oh my goodness, Ghostbusters like was influenced by this, and Nightmare on Elm Street was influenced by this, and The Sixth Sense was influenced by this, and wowza, so much has taken from this film that traumatized me as a 4-year-old. So, considering you don't really remember it, I'll kind of give you the plot.
Yes, please do.
So it takes place in, I've forgotten the name of it, but it takes place in this planned community. It's not Queso Verde, because that would be green cheese. It means green hill in Spanish. I looked it up, but I don't remember the word because I don't speak Spanish. It says planned something verde. Planned community. All the houses look exactly the same. It's this, 1980s suburban wonderland.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Kachunka houses, we used to call them. Mm-hmm.
And so we meet the Freeling family. There's the father, Steve, played by Craig T. Nelson, who, my goodness, was a handsome young man. I did not know.
Huh.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a surprise.
The mother, whose name is Diane, played by Jo Beth Williams, who is phenomenal. There's the eldest daughter, played by Dominique Dunn. Her name is Dana. There is the middle child is Robbie, played by, I cannot remember the actor's name. And then the youngest child, so Dana is 16, Robbie is 8, and Carol Ann, the little girl with the blonde hair and blue eyes, who is adorable, she is 5, and she's played by Heather O'Rourke.
She was. Yes. She was right between us.
So she was very much like, we saw her, we're like, Landsman!
Oh, it's for us.
One of us!
Mishpucha. Yeah, the little blonde girl.
It was
She was
Mishpucha.
Mishpucha.
Yeah. So in the very first scene, Steve has fallen asleep in front of the TV, and it is playing the Star Spangled Banner. If younger listeners might not know this, but TV used to end, and they'd play the Star Spangled Banner and then go to just static at the end. It would be like at 2:00 in the morning. So Steve has fallen asleep, and we do this again. Spielberg, or this might have been Hooper, does this amazing thing where the dog comes and tries to see if there's any snacks left in the chair where Steve is sitting. Then he goes up and visits everyone in the house. So you get to be introduced to everyone in the house through the dog.
Through the dog's travel?
It's
oh my
so
God,
good.
that's brilliant.
And
I love it.
And it's hilarious
I love it.
because Dana, the teenager, has an entire bag of chips under her pillow.
I have a teenage girl in my house. That tracks.
So Carol Ann and Robbie share a bedroom. She wakes up and comes downstairs and sits at the television, puts her hands on it to the static, and starts talking to it, saying, "I can't hear you. I can't hear your name." And then starts answering questions. 5, yes, I don't know. And then she starts shouting, which wakes the whole family up, and they come downstairs.
I remember that,
Yes.
those hands on the TV
Yes.
screen. Stuff
So-
of nightmares.
It's the weekend. That must have been a Saturday night. The next day is Sunday. Steve is watching a football game with several of the other men in the neighborhood right there in his living room. Diane is cleaning the house, and she finds that Tweety, the pet bird that lived in Robbie and Carol Ann's house, has died. And she says, "Oh, Tweety, couldn't you have waited for a school day?"
That's so real.
So she initially wants to just flush it, but Carol Ann catches her, and so they end up burying it in a box. And they have a very cute thing where Carol Ann says, like, "It smells bad. Tweety doesn't like how it smells." And and her mom's like, "Tweety can't smell anymore." And we'll put a flower in it. And then she puts licorice in case he gets hungry, and a little napkin in for bedtime, and a picture of the family in case he gets lonely. And so they bury the box in the backyard while Robbie is climbing the tree right next to where they're doing it and making fun. And Dana is kind of making fun too. But as soon as they've buried Tweety, Caroline goes, "Can I have a goldfish now?" So really, like, got the family dynamics down.
Tracks.
So at bedtime that night, Carol Ann has 2 new goldfish. They're going to bed. There is a clown, which, let me tell you, this was the thing that I remembered most from this movie.
There's
It's
a clown in this
a
movie?
clown doll. Yeah.
Oh,
So there's
okay.
a clown that sits in a chair in the bedroom. And so Diane puts the kids to bed. There's a storm coming. Robbie's a little worried about it. And Diane's like, no, it'll be fine. So they put the light on in the closet because Carol Ann insists on that, and then turns off the light in their room. In there quiet for a little while, Robbie's getting freaked out about the clown, so he throws his jacket over it. Smart move, Rob. Smart move. And we see Steve and Diane just kind of talking. They're smoking a joint together in bed. And Diane is reading through a book on psychology, talking about how nocturnal somnambulism, sleepwalking, may be genetic. And she tells a story of how she went sleepwalking when she was 10 years old and went like 3 blocks and ended up falling asleep in the back of the car of some guy. She just like got in and then went back to sleep in there. And the guy didn't even realize she was there until he got to work. And then she started screaming, and yeah, it's this
Holy
whole
cow.
story. So, and it's like, okay, so that's what's going on with Carol Ann, is what they're thinking. And so then she says, "Oh my God, well, what happens if she like falls into the pool?" And so that's how it's introduced to us, that they're putting a pool in the backyard.
Oh, based on what I remember,
Yeah.
that's bad news.
So, and Steve is reassuring her, it's fine. That's nothing, that's not going to happen. And they're like giggling and stuff like that. Robbie comes in scared because the storm seems to be getting stronger. And Steve takes him back to his room, tells him, like, when you see lightning, count until you hear the thunder. And if you have to count longer each time, it means the storm's going away.
I learned that
You
from
did.
Poltergeist. Holy cow.
And Robbie also says he's really scared about the tree that's right outside the window. He's like, it knows I live here. It's like reaching for me. And Steve says like, well, yeah, it is a very old tree. And we built the house right here because it's a wise old tree. And it does know us because it's been here so long. But that's why I built the house here. And so that's how you learn that Steve has something to do with this development. The next day, some weird stuff happens, like a glass shatters when it shouldn't have. Some silverware like kind of bends randomly. And then the two older kids go off to school. And Diane has told all the kids, like, please push the chairs in at the kitchen table because the dog will get into the food if they don't. And she told them to do that. They'd been pushed in, and she comes back down after, running around doing whatever. And all the chairs are pulled out. And she turns to Carol Ann and says, oh, gosh, that's right. Anyway, she turns to Carol Ann and says, did you do that? She says, no. And she turns around for a second to she's pushed all the chairs in. She's turned around for like a second, comes back, and the chairs are piled on top of the table in a way that would have been impossible.
That ain't
for anybody to do. For any one person to do.
Oh.
I see. It was so quick.
Because it was so quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that ain't creepy.
Super creepy. Something I've forgotten. The storm got stronger, and so the kids ended up sleeping in the parents' bed. And in the middle of the night, they had left the TV on. TV's constantly on in this house. They'd left the TV on. Mm-hmm. The static is going. Carol Ann got up and, did the thing again. And as she's watching, like a hand comes out of the TV, flies around, and then goes into the wall. And then there's like an earthquake. And then Carol Ann goes, they're here. Do you remember that?
Oh my God. My blood pressure just spiked.
So anyway, chairs are weird, doing the weird thing. And Diane is actually delighted by this. So she thinks it's really cool.
She doesn't know what
she does not know what movie she's in,
obviously.
We see Steve at work. He is basically a realtor for this development. We later learn he's responsible for 42% of all sales. And we see that every single house is literally exactly the same. So he gets home from work and she meets him outside. She says, Steve, come with me very quickly. I need you to see this. Don't say anything. Remember back in our distant past when you had an open mind. And so she takes him to the kitchen. She's drawn some things on the floor, like a circle and arrows. She puts one of the kitchen chairs in the circle. She's like, just wait, just wait, just wait. And then it pulls away. And she's like, isn't that amazing? So then she has a bike helmet that she puts on Carol Ann, and she puts Carol Ann on the circle. And then Carol Ann gets pulled to the other side. And she has Steve catch her. And Diane describes it. It's this itchy feeling that pulls you. Because Diane has done it too.
Diane has done it too?
We just don't see it.
Oh.
They go to their next door neighbor. Have you had any disturbances? Nope, nothing. We have seen that day the crew is coming and has dug just the hole for the swimming pool. So that's just hanging out back there. Just a giant
pit.
That night, there is another storm. And again, Diane is isn't it amazing? There's things we don't understand about this world. And this is the other thing. That was the clown. And then the other thing, the tree breaks into the room and grabs Robbie out of his bed and is trying to eat him. That scared the absolute shit out of me. So
God. I vaguely remember the gnarled branches as hands.
So the parents run in and see him being pulled out. Carol Ann is still in her bed. The parents and Dana run outside to try to get to Robbie. They're freaking out trying to get to Robbie. As that happens, things start swirling and being pulled into the closet in the kids' bedroom. And Carol Ann has this headboard that's it's this decorative headboard, and she's holding on to it and being pulled horizontally and calling for her parents. But because they're screaming for Robbie and terrified for their son, they're not hearing. So they are like fighting to get Robbie back. He's like halfway down the gullet of this tree thing. There's a tornado coming. So they manage to get Robbie out. The tornado takes the tree up and away. And they go, oh, crap, where's Carol Ann? And so they go up into the room. At that point, the beds even are up against the door to the closet because they've been pulled that way, but nothing's being pulled anymore. So they go into the closet and they're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And they find a figure that's covered in a blanket going like, is she okay? What's going on? And they pull the blanket off and it's the clown. So they start looking everywhere. Steve won't let Dana go or Robbie go into the kitchen because he's freaked out about what was going on with that. Robbie is very traumatized. He's like covered in muck and
I
like
guess so.
Cuts and bruises and stuff. And he wanders into his parents' room where the TV is still on and he can hear Carol Ann's voice coming through the TV.
Yeah, she's in the TV. I remember her being in the TV.
Next scene, Steve has gone to a university and is consulting with 3 parapsychologists. There's Dr. Lesh, Marty, and Ryan. Dr. Lesh is a woman played by, her last name is Straight, Brenda Straight, I think. And she's amazing. And so they take his information and she's like, well, we may not be able to find out what's going on. He's like, we don't care. We just want our little girl back. And she says, can you keep this from the media? He's like, we don't want to tell anyone about it because all we want is our daughter back. We haven't even gone to the police because we know they won't believe us. So they go to the house and they are telling them like, well, we do have some experience with this. Ryan was saying like, I got film footage of a Matchbox car traveling on its own about 7 feet. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, it took about 7 hours. Like, what do you mean it took 7 hours? Well, to get from one end to the other, the 7 feet. But if you look at it from time lapse, it's amazing. And he's like, uh-huh. And so then he opens the door to the kids' room where everything's floating and moving around. And like all three of the parapsychologists are like, we're not prepared for this.
Yeah. That definitely sounds like Ghostbusters. Ray, the sponge is migrated about 3 feet.
So they set up cameras and everything. Everyone's sleeping downstairs. They've closed off that room. They try to contact Carol Ann and are able to speak to her. She responds most to Diane. She says there's a light and she's scared of it. And Dr. Lesh says, do not go towards the light. And so they are basically waiting to see what happens overnight because things happen much more after dark. So the kids go to sleep. I think Dana goes to a friend's house to sleep. Robbie stays there with his parents. But they're all sleeping there in the living room. And Dr. Lesh and Diane have this conversation that is just amazing about what it is they're doing, how terrified Dr. Lesh is. She has a PhD in psychology, but she's spent her life on this hobby of hers because nobody can get a PhD in parapsychology. And that she never actually anticipated seeing this. And Dr. Lesh kind of explains her belief, which is that ghosts are people who either don't realize they have died. And so they feel jealousy and anger towards the living because they can't enjoy the things that the living enjoy. And so Carol Ann has this like amazing life force and they're drawn to that. And so they're not letting her go. And they need to go to the light to be able to move on. So in the middle of the night, that thing with the peeling the face off. So Marty goes into the kitchen to get something to eat in the middle of the night. He pulls out an entire steak out of the fridge, like he's going to cook it for himself. But it's just like visual shortcuts I get, but it's just like it should have been wrapped in something. Anyway. And he's chewing on a chicken wing or something. Like he finds a chicken wing and he's chewing on that. And so he puts the steak like just straight on the counter, nothing underneath of it.
They didn't care about food safety in the early 80s.
Marty didn't, apparently. And this is the other thing that's very Ghostbusters. The steak starts moving across the counter. And then No,
Does it
it
cook?
explodes with like putrescence. And then like
Ew.
he freaks out and like opens his mouth, the chicken wing falls and like it's covered in maggots. And then he goes into like there's like a sink, like a utility sink in another room, and he like throws up into it, and then he's got blood coming out of his face and he starts clawing his own face. And then all of a sudden his face is normal again, and it's been this like hallucination.
I remember
Yeah.
that scene
Yeah.
vividly. It was very disturbing to 7-year-old me.
He goes back into the living room where Ryan is listening to music and so is not realizing that something's going on. And there are these ethereal spirits coming down the stairs, and they're beautiful, but also terrifying. So they managed to catch all that on camera. And then that's the end of the night. So the next morning, Dr. Lesh says, I have to go. I will come back. Marty's not coming back with me. He's not okay. Ryan will come back, and I'm bringing help. Steve's boss shows up, Mr. Teague, and says, come take a ride with me. Steve has said that he has the flu. That's why he's not coming in. And he looks like shit, so it looks correct. The boss is afraid that Steve is trying to find another job. So he takes him up to the top of this hill where you can see the entire valley where Queso Verde is. And we know that they are already starting phase 4, and Steve and Diane's house was part of phase 1. And so they're at the top of the hill, and Mr. Teague says, like, imagine if this were your view. And Steve says, well, that would be great for the person living up here, but not so great for the people in the valley. And Mr. Teague's like, well, you don't have to live in the valley anymore. You could live here. And he's like, we should have made you partner 3 years ago. You're responsible for 42% of sales and blah, 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 blah. And then Steve turns around and there's this giant cemetery behind him. And he says, like, I don't know if this is the right place for housing. Mr. Teague says, yeah, it's not like it's an ancient burial ground. And we've done it before. Phase 1, there was a cemetery there and we moved it. You know, it's 5 minutes down the road. Who's going to complain? And Steve's like, seems not okay, but, you know, I guess if nobody's complained, that's fine. So that evening, Dr. Lesh brings Tangina Barron, played by Zelda Rubinstein, who is this tiny little woman with this very high voice who is so freaking badass. Do you remember her?
Oh, she's older, like,
yeah,
or like middle aged, or
50s
like
ish, maybe 60s,
50s or early 60s. Yes, I remember.
Mm-hmm. And so Steve thinks she's completely delulu. And so she heads upstairs. She's like, you're jamming my frequencies. Like, you know, give me some space. She heads upstairs and she calls down like, so what was in this locked room? And so Steve is like not answering her. And Diane's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm answering her in my mind. And so they get him to it's where my son and daughter slept. And then they're like yelling at him like, hey, why are you not? But whispering like, you shouldn't be doing that. And he's like, well, I just don't think, you know, she can actually read minds or whatever. And then she calls from the top of the stairs like, no, I heard you. I just don't like trick answers. So like, so she proves herself right then. She says, I can get your daughter back. There are spirits that need to move on. You need to do everything I say. But in addition to the spirits, there is a beast. The beast has made itself seem like a child, and your child has like made itself a playmate for your child, and she's in danger. So, but we need to go through that closet to get her. So they set up, there's a portal basically between the closet to the living room. And somewhere in between there is the in-between place where everything is. So they send a couple of tennis balls through to test it. And then they send a rope through that is like tied at both ends so that it can be followed. And then Tangina was going to go to get Carol Ann, but she's a 5-year-old girl. And Diane says, no, you don't know her. I have to go. And Steve offers, and she's like, you're the only one strong enough to hold the rope. Like, so Diane goes through. Tangina is telling him, don't let go, don't pull her back, whatever. And then the beast appears and is like roaring at Steve, and he freaks out, like lets go of the rope so that it has enough slack so that she can fall down. And in the living room is Diane holding Carol Ann, covered in gook. It's very like birth coded.
And like ectoplasm, like Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it's ectoplasm. So they take them to the bathtub and clean them off, and they start breathing. Everything seems to be okay. They are packing the next day to leave.
I guess.
Steve has to go quit. He's already told his boss go to hell, but he won't take that for an answer. So Diane says, well, what are you going to tell him? He says, I'm going to give him directions. But the plan is they're sleeping at the Holiday Inn down the road that night, but they've packed up the moving truck. And, like if the kids conk out, that's fine. Let them sleep. But we're going to gather everyone up, get in the car and go this evening. Diane has gotten gray in her hair overnight. So she is like dyeing it and taking a bath and dyeing it. And she asks Robbie, and Tangina has declared the house is now clean. So she's asked Robbie and Carol Ann to put themselves to bed. She's going to take a bath. And they go to bed. And that's when the clown comes alive. And that's when I was just like, I really did watch this whole goddamn movie because this is the thing that scared the crap out of me.
Tangina was wrong.
The spirits had left, but the beast had not. So the clown comes alive and leaves its chair and then wraps its like arm around Robbie and is pulling him under the bed. The closet door opens and is pulling the kids. At this point, Diane is out of the bath. She's in her nightgown, and she starts being pulled up the wall. So this is what was very Nightmare on Elm Street. She fights her way down and is trying to get to the kids, and the house is like pushing her out. She ends up in the backyard. She can't get in, falls into the pool.
The pit.
And
coffins start falling
coffins
out.
and dead bodies. She manages to get out with the help of the neighbor. She goes back in, just barely manages to get the kids out. Steve returns with Mr. Teague. At that point, Dana is on a date, we know, and is going to get a ride home from her date. And now, like, bodies are falling everywhere. And Steve has to try to fight to get to his family. They run around to the backyard and see all the bodies. And Steve says, oh my God, Mr. Teague, you moved the headstones but left the bodies. You built this neighborhood right over those bodies. They manage to get the whole family into the car and get out of there. And the house like sucks into itself.
Like gets like imploded
and
down.
Is pulled into the ground.
Yeah, I remember that.
Just as Dana shows up, they get in the car and run. And meanwhile, he's saying, don't look back to the whole family. They get to the motel, they get into the room, and the last thing you see is him wheeling the TV out and leaving it outside.
In the hallway or in the, yeah. It's remarkable how much I remember these 42 years later.
It was traumatic. This movie was PG.
I cannot believe that.
This was before PG-13 existed, but I know.
Still. Holy moly.
So,
all right.
Okay, let's start with Bechdel, because we always do. So, listeners, as a reminder, the Bechdel test asks 3 questions. Are there at least 2 female characters with names? Do they talk to each other? And do they talk to each other about something other than a man or a boy? Passes with flying colors. Diane talks to Dana and Carol Ann. Dr. Lesh and Diane talk. Tangina and Diane talk about everything, all kinds of stuff. It's amazing. These are all well-wrought, fully formed female characters. Carol Ann is a 5-year-old girl, so like,
yeah,
but
sure,
she's a 5-year-old girl. So in some ways, it does gender really well. Also, this is Diane's movie. She is the protagonist. She is the hero of this movie. Even though the first person we see on screen is Steve.
She's the one who saves her daughter, though. And she knows that she's the only one who could. And she genuinely, I mean, that tracks to me when I think about when my daughter was 5. Like, she's not going with anybody else, not even her other parent.
Yeah. And then specifically the moment when she's in the pool surrounded by these bodies and terrified, what she's really terrified for is her children. Like, Yes, it's horrifying what's happening to her. But the second she's out of the pool, because the neighbor has pulled her out and they're going, oh my God, what's going on? What's happening? What's happening? She's like, I have to get to my children. So she does not take a second. And when Steve shows up, like there's something seriously going wrong at the house. And like he stops and like stares and is like awestruck sounds positive, but like stricken. And it's just like, get a move on, Steve. What the fuck is wrong with you? Diane wouldn't pause. So that is really, really cool. There's something really weird about this, though, in part because of like what I was talking about with what poltergeists are associated with.
Right. So they were there for the older daughter, Dana.
No. Now, this film clearly makes it clear that it's about Carol Ann. However, when the workers are there to dig the pool, Dana is leaving for school and they start doing the not just ogling, like, hey, pretty, like, love you, I love you.
Ew,
they're
catcalling the 16-year-old
girl in her backyard at her house.
Oh, that is
and
nasty.
So she like playfully does like this thing where she like one hand, and then gives them the finger.
Listeners who you couldn't see my sister just do that. It was like the Macarena.
Yeah. And Diane is witnessing this through the window and just kind of like smiles.
It was the cost of being female.
And like you get the impression of like, she handled it well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so like there's a couple other things. So when Diane tells Dana, hey, we're going to be spending the night at the Holiday Inn on Route 74. And Dana says, oh, I remember that one. And Diane says, you remember that Holiday Inn? Why? And then Dana distracts her by talking about her gray hair. And when Dana gets back from her date, she's got a hickey on her neck. So there's this tension about sexuality. The other thing that's really weird is they ask Steve, when he interviews the three parapsychologists, they ask him for everyone in the house and their ages. And he says, well, there's my wife, Diane. She's 31. No, 32. Dana is 16.
Oh, good
so
point.
Like, ew.
They were high school sweethearts. She got pregnant when they were in high school. And
there's nothing is commented about that. No one says anything about that. But I personally, if I were the 32-year-old mother of a 16-year-old girl, would probably be a little worried.
About your 16-year-old who's getting hickeys and going to the motel?
So, which brings me to the thing that I think is really interesting, because I think this story is a lot about mothers and daughters. So we do not see either Steve or Diane's mother. She is mentioned because they send Robbie to his grandmother's house. They don't say whether it's Steve's mother or Diane's mother. But the relationship and the intimacy that Diane and Dr. Lesh create together is very mother-daughter.
With Lesh as the
because
mother?
Dr. Lesh is probably in her 50s.
Okay.
And she's human because her hands are shaking after they see the evidence for the first time. She's very human, but she's also comforting. And so she has this sense of authority, but also like humanity. And so the way that they talk to each other, the way that they draw comfort from each other is very mother-daughter. And it was an interesting thing to see because I don't recall seeing stuff like that in movies in the 1980s necessarily.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Well, women weren't friendly in movies in the 80s. They were only rivals.
And even she doesn't have much presence in the film in terms of screen time, but Tangina has a similar sort of, like, she has this very weird, and like she's perfectly cast because she's both childlike and unutterably old and wise, but she has a similar kind of like maternal energy. that is just really, really fascinating. And there's a point where she even has Diane kneel. Now, she does it because she's like, I'm going to get whiplash. It's staring up at you because of how small Tangina is. But there is this like, not hierarchy, but this kind of like sense of supplication even.
Mm.
And seeing how she mothers Carol Ann through handling Tweety's death. You see what a good parent Diane is, but it feels like she's missing a maternal figure in her life.
Diane's missing a maternal figure. Interesting. I don't have a solid answer, but the furniture that is making itself known right now is the feminine archetypes of the maiden, mother, and crone, and the ways in which like Lesh and Tangina come in as crones to Diane's mother, and I suppose Carol Ann's maiden, because it sounds like Dana is kind of a little bit absent from the storyline.
So it really ties into, like, it digs into what is actually most important in families, because they at points they talk about, like, we worked so hard for this to get these trappings of success. You know, the suburban house. We're putting in a pool. We've got a TV in every room that's always on. All of these sorts of things. But what is actually, you know, most important for them is you know, this each other. And then you even see that with Dr. Lesh. Like, this is something she's been passionate about, you know, studying this parapsychology. When she actually encounters it, she is terrified.
And her primary objective is saving this family.
And
not capturing, you know, not the scientific discovery, but saving this family. Yeah. We don't have a lot of time, and I'm really curious about what you, like, the thing that you told me about Poltergeist that I didn't know about, this sort of adolescent girl and the sort of almost like the menstrual ghosts thing, a question, and then that Carol Ann is the focus, but we have this sexually active teenager at the same time. Like, what's happening there, do you think? Because I feel like it's a bit of a subversion in my mind.
In some ways, yes. I think there's a couple of things going on. I think some of it is how Steven Spielberg writes movies. An adorable 5-year-old who's blonde and blue-eyed and is just absolutely fetching is going to get more butts in seats than the typical poltergeist victim, which is a snarky adolescent girl who is really, really hard to parent.
Right, who also are, like, of all of, like, the identities, like, as a society, we do not mind shitting on adolescent girls.
Which is, like, part of where the poltergeist mythos comes from. It's because we don't like adolescent girls.
We really don't, like, as a society.
So, yes, it's a subversion, but I think that it's significant that Dana is in the house. Like, it could have just been Robbie and Carol Ann, and that the story wouldn't have changed much, honestly.
Right, because it sounds like Dana's not actually an actor in the plot.
So I think that is like a manifestation of the very discomfort that has brought about the poltergeist myth, is why we have this 5-year-old girl. Now, I think another thing that I think is really important to point out, people talk about this movie being cursed. Dominique Dunne, who played Dana, I think she was about 21 when this movie was filmed. She was killed about 1.5 years later when her ex-boyfriend strangled her. She was not able to get a restraining order on him, that sort of thing. It was, you know, very typical intimate partner violence. I don't think that is something we should gloss over, because it is all part and parcel of it being perfectly okay for this film to have construction workers ogling her when she's playing a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
In her own backyard.
Home,
and
basically.
It's played for, like, not laughs exactly, but just like, oh, goodness. Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol Ann, died about 6 years later. She got some sort of terrible flu and she ended up having to have surgery for it, and she just didn't survive it. That is unrelated to any of this, but it is kind of, it's tragic to think that of the 3 children in this, only 1 survived, and it was the boy.
Yeah, jeez.
And that brings me to one thing that I want to talk about: respect for the dead. So prior to watching it for this episode, I also remembered it as a Native American burial ground. It's not.
But it's not. Not if they're coffins.
And headstones. And like, he uses the term ancient burial ground at some point. So he's like, it's not like it's that, meaning like,
maybe that's why it's stuck in our heads.
And I think the expectation in the 1980s was that had it been a Native American burial ground, it would have had protection or different kind of protection. So the one thing that I knew about this movie was that JoBeth Williams, in that scene where she's in the pool and surrounded by the bodies, it took 4 or 5 days to film that. And it sounds horrifying. And she talked about how she thought that these were plastic skeletons. They were real skeletons.
Did they not know what movie they were making? Carol Ann has more respect for the dead with her little Tweety.
So I was doing some reading. The skeletons were from like a surgical supply. In the early 80s, the choices were limited, and it was cheaper to get actual surgical skeletons. And then they built them up to make them look juicy. But it is so ironic to me that this film is about how Mr. Teague had no respect for the dead.
And then they're making actual human beings' remains look juicier for film.
And now these were people who donated their bodies to science or whatever, but science, not Hollywood.
The movie Poltergeist is not science.
Not Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't know how to think about that. Now, you did bring up poor Tweety. This is why Steven Spielberg is my hero. They bury Tweety in the backyard in the garden. It's on a Sunday. The next day, Monday, is when the caterpillar digger comes in to dig. And they turn up the dirt, and you see the box with Tweety in it get turned up. And it is like, visual metaphors are perfect. It's just so well done.
Like, yeah, just some foreshadowing.
So well done.
Wow. Well, I know you have a hard stop, so I'm going to go, even though we didn't quite get to suburbia and the dangers of television, we'll leave that as something that listeners, bring it to us in the comments wherever you're listening, because there's more to say.
There's a lot in here.
But we are out of time. So let me try and reflect back to you some of the things that I heard about Poltergeist, besides the fact that it scared both of us and traumatized us. So I heard a lot about story construction and sort of the beauty of story construction and how good Steven Spielberg is at it in many ways. You spent a lot of time really talking about mothers and daughters, whether literal or sort of found family mothers and daughters relationships, insofar as we see Diane as a very good mother who herself needs to be mothered. And so she's mothered by both Dr. Lesh and Tangina. Thank you. I want to say Tatiana. I knew that was wrong. Tangina. And she is, as you said it, the hero of this story. She's the protagonist. She is the hero. We see her do what needs to be done without hesitation. She goes into the goo place and is reborn with her daughter. She climbs out of the terrifying swimming pool full of actual dead bodies and immediately goes to find her children, unlike her husband, who stands there like dumbstruck for a moment before he figures out what to do. We also spent some time talking about sexuality and female sexuality and adolescent girls and the ways in which society kind of hates them and is scared of them, also wants to control their sexuality, and the ways that this movie, in some ways subverted that by making Carol Ann the subject of the poltergeist's kind of desire, if you will, but also had Dana in the house and had us witness her being harassed and really her mom just being like, that's how it goes. Despite the fact that I just said that her mom was a good mom. Her mom was a good mom, but also knew how society worked. And that was the cost of being female. So all of that is swirling like the household possessions of the people who live in the poltergeist house. I was surprised to learn that this movie was rated PG, though it was before PG-13 existed. And you named just how influential it was that many films that are kind of canonical for you and me are derivative or in some ways influenced, including Ghostbusters, Nightmare on Elm Street, and The Sixth Sense. I'm sure there are others. The last thing was that I remember, I'm sure there are others, the respect for the dead, that there's this like meta irony. Maybe irony is the wrong word, but this meta kind of like wrongness. This whole movie is about how we need to respect the dead because there are things that we don't understand. And then Steve and Hooper actually like used legit human remains for this film. And like my eyeballs are huge right now. Oh, I forgot to name It Passes Bechdel with flying colors. Many, many conversations about between named female characters about things besides men. What did I forget?
Just the why this is a personal film for us.
Yeah, right. The fact that we saw it when we were 7 and 4, respectively. And like, I still remember very clearly some scenes, and as did you with the clown and the...
I was sure we must have like turned the film. Like, I did not think we saw it to the end. I was like, okay, I must have misremembered. Like, that clown is creepy, but it must not come back in. When it came back in at the end, I was just like, holy shit, Dad, what were you thinking?
Dad? Sorry, we have respect for you, Dad. You're dead. We have respect for the dead on Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit.
We still do question your parenting choices in 1983.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. All right.
So,
thank you. This was really fun. I'm
oh,
still not
no, that's
watch
okay.
it, but I am glad to rehave the plot synopsis. I really am. And the fact that I remember the guy pulling his face off.
Yeah, that was
like,
the thing where I was like, because I think I
actually...
texted you, this is both less scary and scarier than I expected. And that was the part that was scarier than I expected.
Yeah. Whew. So next week, is it me or is it our guest?
I think it's our guest. I think it's Ryan Cunningham, who I know through my writers group, who is a director. She's bringing her deep thoughts on Rosemary's Baby. So,
that's
another scary one.
Scared of.
See you then.
See you then. This show is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. If you enjoy it even half as much as we do, please consider helping to keep us overthinking. You can support us at our Patreon. There's a link in the show notes. Or leave a positive review so others can find us. And of course, share the show with your people. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes.
Thank you to Resonate Recordings for editing today's episode.
Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?